Welcome to Radio Amenti, embracing the eternal now where minds and timelines merge, inspiring synchronicity, awakening potential, and making sense of change. Love. Oh, love. So I put a poll on Instagram about what you'd like my next solo cast episode to be. And my options were laughter and love and sex. And somewhat overwhelmingly, most of you voted for love and sex. So here we go. There's this obscure movie from the late 90s, 2000s. I should know the date as I'm doing this, but whatever. It's a movie called Playing by Heart, and it's about these intersecting stories of love and relationship. And Angelina Jolie is in it, Ryan Phillippe, Sean Connery, Gillian Anderson, Jon Stewart. It's a really good movie that I'm surprised more people haven't heard of. But anyway, there's a line in it where one of the characters says that talking about love is like dancing about architecture.
I have a friend, a jazz musician, good player, really terrific. I go and hear him jam every month or so, and he plays this piece I love, an old Chet Baker song. And he blows the same notes every time, but every time it sounds different. And we had drinks one night when I used to drink. And I tried to tell him how that song made me feel, how his playing made me feel, how the music made me feel. And he just kept shaking his head, and he said, "Joan, you can't talk about music. Talking about music is like dancing about architecture." I said, "Well, okay, fine. You're gonna get all philosophical on me. It's just as pointless as talking about a lot of things. Love, for instance." And my friend laughed, and he said, "Definitely, most definitely, talking about love is like dancing about architecture." So I don't know, he might be right. But it ain't gonna stop me from trying. I wish you'd do that more often. Smile.
And it stuck with me from the moment I rented that film at Blockbuster in high school to now. And when it comes to talking about love, it feels a little bit like dancing about architecture. Love, it's something I've been thinking a lot about in the time of quarantine, because I'm finding myself for the first time in I don't even know how long, probably the first time ever in my adult life, being truly, completely alone. Alone in the sense of not having a romantic partner, not having a lover, really just being with myself and coming to understand what that actually means. I think a lot about love as this space of awareness, as a level of consciousness, as this mindset to achieve, as this state to be, not necessarily a thing to attain. And it's paradoxical because, to find love, I want to find love. How can I find love? Well, really what I'm coming to realize is that in order to find love, you have to first find yourself. Because until you find yourself completely, everything then becomes a lesson. Or everything always is a lesson. But you're going to continue to be met with lessons along the way to help you reveal the deeper parts of yourself until you're ready to meet that reflection that can mirror the best parts of yourself. I say this because I'm going to offer a really interesting perspective, looking back to the past to understand the present and to cultivate a new future. So I can honestly look back to every relationship I've ever had and see the fractal element, the refracted element of what they represented on my life path and how they were almost an archetypal unfolding of something greater. I've been in long-term relationships since I was 17. My first relationship, I was with someone for 5 years. And this person was kind, compassionate, loving, wonderful. I feel so lucky that I got to have this teenage romance that helped me through some of the most challenging moments in my life. He was with me when my mom got a DUI. He was with me when my father died. He was with me through a lot of really traumatizing life lessons and loved me completely. But I didn't give him the love that he deserved. And I can look back to that and almost have a heavy heart because I wasn't very nice to him. But I was a kid, 17 to 21, 22 of being with somebody. You are still figuring out who you are, so you can't really be the best version of yourself when you're going through an initiation from young adulthood to somewhat adulthood. But in looking back at that lesson, he was a beautiful apparition of loving awareness, set a bar for treatment that I'm very grateful for. I don't want to use this podcast to go through my whole history of dating because, that's jaunting and who wants to hear that? But I will say that in the long-term relationships that unfolded after that, 2 years, 2 years, 3 years, 3 years, 2 years, everything was such an incredible unfolding and a sacred mirror. And I think that's really an incredible way to look at relationship as a sacred mirror. When I think about love now and what that would feel like or look like to experience again, all of these lessons have helped shape a new template for what that is. I think back to the last time I kind of had a whirlwind romance when I was in Tibet. I spoke about this on episode 011 Sacred Mountain with the Euphemet podcast, my dear friend Jim Perry. And I never really talked about it, I guess, completely candidly in a confessional. So I guess that's a good thing about these solo casts is that it offers space to have a confessional too and to sort things out and to share. And hopefully in my sharing, it hits a chord or at the very least entertains. So on my trip to Tibet about, God, how long ago is it now? Over 2 years ago. I essentially, my friend Nitin Ron, he is a neonatologist, which means he saves premature babies. And he also studies the effects of meditation and mountain climbing. And at Nitin's birthday party a few years ago, he had talked about a trip he would be taking to Nepal and to Mount Kailash. And I had never heard of Mount Kailash. I'm not afraid to admit that I can oftentimes be a bit of a ditz, and I actually thought that Nepal was in India, so I literally thought I was just inviting myself on a trip to India. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I just knew that I had to go, and I invited myself, and luckily there was space to go on the trip, and there I went. So it was me, Nitin, a group of travelers, this couple that I'm friends with, one of who is a practicing Vajrayana Buddhist, another Vajrayana Buddhist, an amazing artist. We had such an incredible sangha of travelers with us. And little did I know, but when we arrived in Nepal, it turned out that we were actually somewhat crashing a trip that this German man and his son had orchestrated as well, to go through Nepal, enjoy the time there, and then go circle sacred Mount Kailash in Tibet. So, a little bit about Mount Kailash before I proceed to tell this tale. Mount Kailash, otherwise known as the Stairway to Heaven, is a mountain range in the Himalayas. And it is 22,000 feet from the Tibetan plateau, and it is most largely considered to be inaccessible. For Hindus, Buddhists, and the Bon faith, Mount Kailash is believed to be the physical embodiment of Mount Meru. It is also believed to be the abode of Shiva. Shiva is a Hindu god, a very sacred Hindu god. So trekking all the way up to the peak of Mount Kailash is absolutely forbidden. And in Tibetan lore, Milarepa actually once ventured up far enough to reach the top of Mount Meru, and when he returned, he forewarned everyone to avoid bothering the god resting high up in the peak. It is also believed that Mount Kailash is the abode of Lord Shiva. So Shiva is a very interesting character, filled with many contradictions. So he's at once the Lord of Yoga and therefore a renunciate ascetic, but he's also the divine master of Tantra, which is an esoteric science that regards sexual union as the most perfect path to spiritual enlightenment. According to legend, the immortal Shiva lies atop Mount Kailash, where he spends his time practicing yogic austerities, making love with his divine consort Parvati, and smoking ganja, a sacred herb which we know as marijuana. The Hindus don't interpret Shiva's behaviors as contradictory, however. They see him in a deity who has wisely integrated the extremes of human nature and thus transcended attachment to any particular and limited way of being. For a Hindu in particular, to make this pilgrimage to Kailash and have the divine view of Shiva's abode is also to attain release from the clutches of ignorance and delusion. It's sacred to the Jains, as they call it Mount Astapada, and it's believed to be the place where Rishabha, the first of the 24 Tirthankaras, attained liberation. For followers of Bon, Tibet's pre-Buddhist shamanistic religion, they call the mountain Tis and believe it to be the seat of the sky goddess Sipa Mine. Additionally, Bon myths regard Tis as the site of the legendary 12th century battle of sorcery between Milarepa and the Bon shaman Narubangchong. Milarepa's defeat of the shaman displaced Bon as the primary religion of Tibet and firmly established Buddhism in its place. So, I wound up there, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I am fascinated by the world's religions, as you know. For those of you who've been following me, I'm a seeker of spirit, and I gaze deeply into many of the esoteric tradition. And I did never in a million years would have imagined to accidentally find myself in Tibet when I thought I was going to India. But there I was. And there I was, arriving in Nepal with my fellow travelers and crashing the party of this German family who this German man was a practicing Buddhist and very devout. And it was actually his third attempt to circle Kailash, and he had planned to circle Kailash 3 times. So it's no joke to this person. Anyway, I meet him, and what can I say? It was intense energy at first sight. I keep repeating this concept that I've learned recently from the study group I'm in, which has been exploring the canon of Alice A. Bailey's work, who's my favorite theosophical teacher. And my teacher has talked often about this concept of recapitulation. If we have many lives and we are various incarnations of life and keep coming back, keep learning lessons, keep revisiting the different levels of the video game simulation until we achieve the next level and so on and so forth. Recapitulation is where we find the breadcrumbs or the cookie crumbs that ignite something within us that help us remember whether it's a book that feels incredibly familiar, or a place that feels incredibly familiar, or a person that feels incredibly familiar. A recapitulation is a remembering of maybe a point in a past life that you only got so far and need to go further into. So when I met this person, it felt like that feeling of recapitulation, remembering, oh, here you are again. Nice to see you. And it sounds irrational to say, but it was kind of like this weird love at first sight. And it was strange. He's there with his son. I don't know anything about him. He speaks German, but yeah. So to suffice it to say, we were attached at the hip through that entire trip, kissing all throughout to Potala Palace and sneaking off into corners and finding places to make out and hold hands and just really connect with one another. It was crazy. And candidly speaking, ignited something in me that I hadn't felt in a really long time. This feeling of hopefulness and irrational care. And yeah. So without going further into all the other nuance and details of the Tibetan trip, which I'll explore in another podcast that's around the Tibetan trip, which I'll do soon, actually. I'll read from my travel notebooks and kind of share some of the other insights gleaned. Since this podcast is about love, really I'm trying to extract the lessons of love here. So suffice it to say, as we're journeying from Nepal to Tibet and attached at the hip, as we're journeying from these spaces, the elevation is continuing to climb. And Nitin, our friend, had us taking this diuretic called Dex, which is to help with altitude sickness. So altitude sickness is no joke. It is not fun. You could die. Literally, it's like having the bends, but not underwater. So as we're ascending in altitude, things are starting to get a little weirder. Your body is adjusting to new heights, literally. And by the time we got to the mountain, it was really intense. Altitude sickness is no joke. So needless to say, we get to the mountain. The first day of hiking is really interesting and filled with adventures. Again, I'm not going to talk about all of that today. But then the second day, the person that, I had fallen so hard for started getting altitude sickness. And to make a long story short, he almost went into cerebral edema, almost died. I had to cut my Cora around the mountain short because I literally thought that he was going to die, and I wanted to stay with him. And divine synchronicity allowed timing to work out in such a way that we arrived at a tea house where Nitin was, and he had to inject him with adrenaline to help with the swelling in his brain. And we left the mountain early, went back to our hotel, and one thing led to another. And the next day he wound up having to be emergency airlifted out of Tibet and back into Nepal because his pupils had dilated and he was on the verge of death. It was a very traumatizing thing to hold space for because, all of these feelings, this person that I've been attached at the hip with for 2 weeks straight, seeing his 13-year-old son being really scared, and just the overwhelmingness of that was a lot. So, needless to say, he got airlifted back to Nepal and then had to go back to Germany, and I continued my trip back from Tibet to Nepal. And the second wave of my trip, once we got back from Tibet into Nepal, was to go to Bhutan and hike Tiger's Nest Monastery. And that's, again, I'll talk more about this whole wondrous experience in another episode. But when I got back to Nepal, there was a gift left behind for me from this person, and he left me a beautiful green Tara statue. It's just so beautiful, so precious. And she kind of wound up becoming a totem for the rest of the trip. trip ended, and about 2 weeks later, I had to go down to Rhythmia to teach a workshop. And it was very strange because, I had some texting back and forth with this person, but not much. We got back to Germany and his life was a bit overwhelming, and it kind of phased out as quickly as it began. But when I was at Rhythmia, it was really funny because the first night of ceremony, there was like 72 women, and I chose to sit in one corner where in the middle of ceremony, a woman started singing the Green Tara mantra, saying Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Soha, Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Soha, over and over. And I'm like, am I tripping? Well, I am tripping, but I can't believe this. So anyway, that had happened, and it was so crazy because I remember asking, like, what was that all about? Why did I have this intense experience of falling in love with somebody and then only to have them almost die? I cut this once in a lifetime journey short and didn't finish circling the mountain because I was afraid he was going to die. And now I'm probably never going to hear from him again or talk to him again. And ayahuasca literally told me that that experience wasn't about him. It was about Tara and about connecting to what she is. So for those of you who don't know what green Tara is, Green Tara is actually one of the most beloved figures in Tibetan Buddhism, and she's considered a bodhisattva that helps people pass beyond the troubles of earthly existence and move toward enlightenment. She's believed to protect people from worldly danger. Tara also means rescuer. She's called because she's believed to rescue us from the 8 outer fears. For example, in Buddhism, it's considered the fear of lions, elephants, fire, snakes, thieves, water bondage, and evil spirits. And from the 8 inner fires, which are fears of pride, ignorance, anger, jealousy, wrong views, attachment, miserliness, and deluded doubts. She's also believed to be the embodiment of the qualities of the feminine principle, so known as the mother of mercy and compassion. She's a source of the female aspect of the universe. She gives birth to warmth, compassion, and relief from bad karma. And she engenders, nourishes, smiles, and feeds the vitality of creation, having sympathy for all beings like a mother does to a child. Green Tara is believed to offer protection from unfortunate circumstances and the wild uncertainty of being a human being stuck within the world of samsara. So ayahuasca literally told me it was never about him. It was never about him. It was about connecting to Green Tara and what she means as a living embodiment practice, and even just how painful it felt to fall in love and then to lose that love. It was an exercise in non-attachment. And that's been a really powerful lesson. I recently rewatched Avatar, and I actually love how they talk about the idea that energy is only ever borrowed and eventually has to be returned. And there's that similar line in the Epic of Gilgamesh. They talk about, there is no permanence. And I've been thinking about that a lot. There is no permanence. There is no forever other than forever unfolding into forever, unfolding into forever. But the finite humanity, our mortality, love offers poetry to the many chapters in our great novel of life. But relationship, even if you're with somebody for, the half of your life, you're eventually going to leave this earth. That other person is eventually going to leave this earth. So cultivating a practice of self-love and compassion is the ultimate, because you are what you leave with. And you, through a spiritual lens, if you believe in reincarnation and all that, you're what you return to. So the more you refine and connect to loving awareness within yourself, compassion within yourself, the more that will be returned to you in a multitude of ways. I've seen that return to me, not necessarily in romantic relationship as of late, but in radiating from that heart space. Love is a building. So talking about love is like dancing about architecture. Love is also a building, and it houses many rooms and many capacities for different expressions. Love is something that can be returned to you in friendship, in your relationship to family, in relationship to nature, earth, your surroundings. Love is a building. Love has many rooms. So thinking about like love and sex and what that all means, candidly speaking, I maybe this is my own limitations, or this is my own weird template of experiencing the world. But to me, casual sex has always felt like an oxymoron, because sex is never really casual. But I guess maybe it is, because like, what's more casual than being naked? But I've always been such a thinker and such a feeler. So when it comes to sex, and no judgment at all, because like I think sex is a beautiful, amazing thing. And, some of my dearest friends work in the adult entertainment industry. And I almost envy that level of confidence and being able to just enjoy the bodily expression without overthinking. But that ain't me, babe. I'm not good at that. I mean, like the last relationship I had, we broke up, but then for 3 years we're lovers, but best friends, because, I just kept finding myself needing to have that intimate component to that. And I don't know, man. Like, I'm not an authority to speak on sex because I'm kind of like almost like sometimes feel so naive about it too. Like, and I share this in vulnerability because I feel like a lot of these solo casts really are just truly like my confessional booth of being vulnerable. I think people have an idea of who I am online because of the aesthetic that I curate, or whatever projections onto the mirage, if you will. But I am really naive. I don't know how to flirt. I don't know how to have casual things. I feel like when I find connection with someone, it's always turns into a great romance, and then becomes a story, I guess you'll say. I can look to every relationship, and it's felt that way. It's felt like little epics within the epic. And when it comes to like talking about sex, I guess, I don't even know. I don't know. So I'll say that. I don't even know why when I put this as a category to talk about love and sex, like who the fuck am I to talk about that? Because I'm a lover. But yeah. If you have any tips, feel free to comment and let me know. But for now, I mean, I can honestly say like it's funny how man plans, God laughs. I've said this a million times, because before even the quarantine hit, I was had put all my stuff in storage, planning to move. I had all these big plans, and I'm like, you know what? Now is the time where I'm actually going to call in my life partner, and I am going to find the person I'm supposed to be with for the rest of my life, and to just really magnetize the perfect mirror to be on this crazy journey with. And then, quarantine hits, and it's like, how can you date even in the time of Corona? Having intimacy and like building a relationship in the time of Corona, like how? I watched that stupid show, Love is Blind, and it's made me laugh because there's like a meme going around about how, we watched this stupid show on Netflix, and now all of a sudden we're in our own little pods, and like dating is now Zoom. But, and not even that. It's a weird time. So all this to say, perhaps there's something to the time in isolation, realizing that, this is a sacred time to go deep into the caverns of your heart and to do some spelunking and excavating and digging deep into the darkness to find the pearls. Well, no, I mean, if we're digging in a cave, I think we're more likely to find diamonds, right? Still find the diamonds in the darkness. And if you want to craft those pearls, if you look at the world as your oyster, and within the oyster, this grain of sand is what causes the irritation that the oyster then turns into a pearl. Looking deeply into darkness and looking deeply at irritation and finding beauty in that. What greater way to really refine and define what it is that you want to have in the world? Do you want to find a soulmate and find that person to be on the path with and be in sacred union with? So the Parvati to your Shiva, the Shiva to your Parvati. Do you want to enjoy life as a beautiful buffet of all different things and experiences and people and everything? Nothing has to be so rigidly defined for the universal, but for the particular, it's been really interesting to refine and define what that looks like, and to really find non-attachment to the timing or non-attachment to the stories and the ideas that are so easy to build up because of past experiences or because of the, I guess, ongoing echoes of the way things have unfolded. I keep thinking about Green Tara because whether in a romantic relationship or not, it's just such a beautiful embodiment practice, and how she came into my life was really an initiation into that. Remembering her when feeling sad or lonely, that, compassion is a beautiful, beautiful thing to imbue into all that you touch, whether in a romantic relationship or not. It's a weird thing because nothing is ever permanent. Everything is always borrowed. Nothing is ever guaranteed, but all potentials exist. Talking about love is like dancing about architecture. How do you want to craft the blueprint for your heart's desire? I guess now's the time to do that. When left alone to your own devices, what does not being alone look like or feel like? These are questions that I have been asking, and these are important questions to ask, no matter what, no matter where you are in life. I turned 35 in April, and I think that's why I guess there's maybe a heavier weight on finding the one or finding the partner, because time is the hourglass of time moving faster in general for the world at large. But there's something about, hitting 35 and thinking about, well, oh man, I don't want to be alone anymore. And yeah, it's weird. I'm sure when I re-listen to this, it'll feel super awkward, but I don't really care. It's important to be truthful, and it's important to be vulnerable. It's important to be raw, because I think we're all desperately in need of finding some semblance of connection, whether that's connection to a romantic partner or connection to a voice on the internet that makes you not feel alone in the world. It's hard to be a human being, and it's even harder when navigating illusions and mirages on the internet that can somehow make you feel like everybody else has it all figured out, but why don't you? I can tell you this, we're all trying to figure it out. And I don't say this from a space of ego or ignorance. I say this from a space of, I've lived a lot of life in 35 years, and there's this book that says if you meet Buddha on the side of the road, you should kill him. And, my friend Matt was like, what does that even mean? If you meet Buddha on the side of the road, you should kill him. It just means to lose your illusions and to metaphorically kill your heroes, because nobody's above the human experience. And nobody's above the complications of being human, suffering, getting older, worry, loss, death. We're all in it. So, even the greatest spiritual teachers are asking these questions, and not necessarily when it comes to like love and sex all the time, but I'm sure that they've had those questions at one point or another. And it's a interesting thing to put out a beacon of vulnerability and see what comes back. So I encourage you to do the same, whether you do have a podcast or if you have a journaling practice or if you like using the internet as a space to share. Vulnerability is a beautiful thing. I truly believe it. And I think that with more vulnerability and more compassion, it offers space for more vulnerability and compassion to come into the world. So all that to say, love is a courageous act. Love is an act that loving without attachment, even more so. Love isn't necessarily quid pro quo. Love is, right? As you've come to know me in these broadcasts or through my work, I really do try my best to weave together different ideas and concepts to showcase the human experience through many lenses and find the unity in them all. And a few weeks ago, I don't even know when, time is all bleeding into one, I rewatched the series on the Bible, which is actually really well done. And the fact that, if you look back to the story of Jesus and his disciples and whatnot, that the person that wound up spreading the gospel farthest, Paul of Tarsus, hated him at first, hated Jesus at first, wanted to take him down. And then he had his sight taken away. And then when his sight returned, he became the spreader of the gospels, the spreader of good news. And to this day, it's funny sitting in weddings and hearing people do their vows or, say cliches, speeches from the Bible or for whatever else. I used to be so like, this is so lame. And it's funny because in the Gnostic Gospels, they say like, those who have ears, let them hear. They say it in the Emerald Tablets as well. If the light is within you, the light within these pages will shine. So I think back to Paul of Tarsus and how you can go from being jaded to enlightened, and how his poem on love is probably the most succinct and beautiful passage on that act of awareness. So I'm going to read it. I even surprise myself still that I would ever look to the Bible as a space of finding information. But here we go. So from Corinthians, if I speak in tongues of men or angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that I can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now, we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. Now in these three remain faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. So I'll leave you with that. I hope that this transmission had some pearls, had some diamonds, had some insight into love as a superlative state of awareness, and romantic love is a thing that may be illusory and fleeting, but also beautiful and revelatory. It's going to be interesting whenever that next partner comes into my life, how it may shift perspective. But until then, I personally don't think it's going to be found through swiping Raya or downloading dating apps. Holding out faith for the divine reflection in the cosmic mirror. And until then, just working on embodying compassion and learning to love myself more. And this is going to be so cheesy, but I don't care. I'm going to share it. So the summer of 2013, in my ayahuasca journal, I wrote this passage about, in order to fly, you must first love yourself. So in order to FLY, you must first love yourself. So think about that. Something to mull on, something to chew on. But until next time, I have some great new episodes coming out that I'm really looking forward to sharing with you. And I'm looking forward to more interviews and more chats. And I thank you for listening. I thank you for being. I love you. And when I say that, I truly mean that, because if you're hearing this, whatever you hear in me exists within you, and there is no separate. And it's not some woo thing. We are all connected, and it's a really beautiful, beautiful thing to be alive in a space where we can connect to connectivity, and those who have ears, let them hear. I love you all. Bye.